When you're in website building mode, I'm willing to bet you don't give much thought at all to your menu. You probably just think it's another thing that you have to have as part of your website, so you slap it up and you move on. But the menu is absolutely something that you should give deeper thought to, because sometimes having the right menu can actually boost sales, and other times having a menu at all can actually hurt sales. So today we're going to talk all about the menu, or we're going to talk about whether you should have a menu, when you should have it and when not to have it, the basic construction of that menu, and a deep dive into each element that makes your menu perfect. My name is Trent Kennelly. I'm a marketing strategist, and on this channel, I talk about all the things that you can do to improve your business through marketing, sales, and analytics. So that sounds good to you and you're excited. Make sure that you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you're into it, comment and let me know whether you've ever experimented with this menu, or maybe you've just thought, I don't even know if I need this thing, and maybe that's why you're here. So welcome, we're gonna find out together. Let me know in the comments what you've been thinking, but until then, let's get started. All right, let's talk about when to have a menu. So this is actually not a very straightforward question. You might just think all the time, but a menu can be very distracting. If you want people to buy directly from you and have no other thoughts, a menu at the top of your page is an excuse for them to leave that sales page and go somewhere else on your site and then leave your site entirely. They'll see maybe the About button or the free resources or something like that. They'll click on that and then they'll just be gone forever. And then the likelihood of a person coming back to that sales page after they've clicked away from it is extremely low. So when should we use a menu? We should really use it for most areas of the site. If they're on your About page, your contact page, your free resources, whatever, stuff like that, that it's okay for them to roam, definitely use it. But if you're trying to get them to focus and get them to make a direct sale, you want to remove it. So if you're on the direct sales page, if you're into your sales funnel, make sure that you remove that menu so that people aren't seeing it and getting distracted by it. Remember, as with everything on your site, this is a question of attention and distraction. You have 3 seconds to keep someone's attention focused where you want them to be, or they're gonna leave. And that's not just the first 3 seconds. It's not like the first 3-second gauntlet must be passed and then they will be there forever. It's the next 3 seconds and the next 3 seconds and the next 3 seconds. How are you continuing to keep them engaged? And if the intention of the page is to simply engage them to move around your site, so maybe they're on a blog page or something like that, then a menu is great, because then you can encourage them to move to different areas of the page and maybe even get them to go down your funnel at some point. But if they're on that sales page and you want them to take a specific action, and that's the whole point of that page, then avoid using a menu as much as possible, because you're looking to get them to focus, and any distraction is going to be taken by the user. So basically what this comes down to is sales pages, no menu, blogs, content pages, that sort of stuff, yes menu. All right, let's talk about the basic construction. So every menu is a little bit different, but there are some typical elements that you can see in each one of them, and we're gonna get into those elements in just a minute, but right now I wanna give you an overview. So the first thing that's important to note is the banner or rectangle, which is the base of everything. Everything else is gonna sit on top of this rectangle. I know that sounds kind of obvious, because the entire web page typically today is built on blocks where you've got 6 sections and a bunch of rows, and you can move things as you want between those blocks. But the reason that it's important to point out this banner at the top behind everything for the menu is that sometimes you're going to see it and sometimes you aren't. So if it's a sticky menu, that means that it stays at the top of your page as you scroll, so you'll always be able to see the menu. And if it's a static menu, then it won't, and it'll just be another feature of the page. And so because of that sticky element, it's important to point this out, especially if you change it to a different color other than white or something like that. So it's very possible that this will be visible. Other elements include your logo and the buttons that lead to other parts of your site. This is the stuff we're going to get really deep into in a minute. You may also find a call to action button in the menu, so that will be a button like at any point on your site, just in the menu. Or on rare occasions, you might find a search bar. You'll often find a cart icon, that sort of stuff. So you can see that the general idea here is to use the menu as a quick access to other parts of your site and a way to engage people to take further action in the case of the cart. So we're going to get into all that detail in just a minute, but as far as basic construction, that's really all there is to it. All right, let's dig into your logo a little bit more. So it's important that this logo first be clear and stand out in the menu. It needs to be really obvious there. You want it to be obvious where someone is at all times. So if during their scrolling, during their moving around, they can see the menu. It's important that they see the logo and that it be obvious, because you can think of this like reminding them of the company, reminding them of where they are at that moment. And seeing that logo just adds a little bit more to who you are. It just helps them remember it a little bit more. It's just another exposure to help them remember who you are. And so next time, it's more possible that if they see the logo, they're going to remember you, or if they hear your name, they're going to remember the logo. Either way, it's a good effect. Now, as to where to put it, you may often notice that the logo is on the left of the menu. The reason for this is that we read from left to right. So when you're looking at the menu, now obviously it's not the first thing you see when you open a site, but when you're looking at that menu, you'll see the logo first. And so that just imprints on your mind a little bit more, just helps you remember things about the company a little bit more, okay? But I do want to point out, this is very important, it doesn't go all the way to the side. It doesn't go all the way to the left. It doesn't jam into the side of your browser window. Just like everything else on the page, there needs to be a margin on the left side and on the right side, but we'll get to that one in a minute. And it needs to have some space between the side wall of the browser and where your content starts, just so it's a little bit easier to read. So where your images on the left need to align to this margin, the start of any of text needs to align to the margin. You want to make sure that your logo doesn't go too far towards the Chrome wall or towards the browser wall, and you want to make sure that it doesn't go too far inward. You want it to align with that margin as well. Next question is how big your logo should be. So you don't want it to take up too much space. There's a certain point where it goes from big enough to notice to too big and in your face. And I would suggest no more than 10% of the available space for your menu should be taken up by the logo. And again, I just want to be very clear here. We're defining the available space as the space that's within the margins. And that margin is even on the left and the right. So if the margin takes up 5% each, you want then the remaining 90%, only 10% of that to be taken up by the logo. Hopefully that's clear. Color is another big question here for the logo, because your logo color is part of your color palette, and so is the menu. So you want to make sure that they're not clashing. If you have 2 to 3 colors in your logo, then it can be very difficult to match it unless you're using a plain color like white to make up for this. So I would check out this video on color psychology just to understand how to really put those two things together. But just to go into a little bit more detail here, it is certainly not the case that all menu bars are white or unicolor in one of those basic white, gray, black sort of colors. But if yours is, your logo can be whatever other color isn't white or what isn't black, okay? Just as long as it stands out. What you're looking for here is complementary colors so that that logo is easy to identify and read. So again, if your banner is bright orange, because that's your main color, then you're probably gonna need a version of your logo that's stark white so that there's no other colors with it and it's easy to identify your logo and the shape of that logo against that bright orange background. So what I would suggest here at a minimum, if you don't watch that video, is to go to Peloton.com, which I'm showing on the screen right now, and play with the complementary colors option to see what works well and what's not gonna clash horribly. Next, let's talk about those links that are not your logo and are not your button. So the majority of the menu is these central links. From a style perspective, there isn't really anything big to talk about here. You wanna keep a uniform color like white or black, just depending on what that banner color ends up being. So if it's bright orange, probably a white. If it's stark black, also a white, but if it's white, maybe you use black text, that sort of stuff. And also considering the font, not a big thing either. You should just keep it simple. So if you're using 2 to 3 fonts in your page generally, you want to use the simplest one for the menu. So maybe you're using Helvetica as one of your 2 to 3 fonts, put that one in the menu. Now, when we're considering what menu items to put there, you should have a few staples. You can include the about page or the button for the contact form. You want to include probably your offer page every time, whatever that sales page is, include that there. Do not include a link with the text for home that sends them to the home page. And the reason for that is that this is redundant. Everybody knows at this point that clicking on the logo sends you home. And if it doesn't do that for you, do it. Set that up. Make that image link to the home page. That way, people are going to click on that and then they'll go home, and you don't have to have that extra button, which ends up just looking unprofessional and clunky anyway. You also shouldn't have too many links. I would suggest a maximum of 4 of these links, because by adding a lot of links, what you're doing is you're creating a similar situation to the paradox of choice. Paradox of choice says that if there are too many options, people are going to choose not to make an option at all. They're not going to make any sort of a choice because it's just too overwhelming for them. So if you have a bunch of button options, people aren't going to click on any of them. It's really important here to pick the most important links to figure out where you're going to get people to go down your sales funnel. Then the last thing to talk about here is the copy. Now I know copy is a big word when it's talking about a single word for the link, but you want to be excessively clear here about what people are going to see when they click on this link. This is a question of simplicity. Can they understand the path that they're about to take with one word? The best way to do this is to just use words that are already well understood. About, pricing, resources, contact, that sort of thing is well understood by the community. No one's going to be confused by it. Next, let's talk about your button. So the button is the most dependent thing that we've discussed so far, meaning that it's not always going to be used. It just depends on your business. So if you're a content creator, for instance, you might not need a button in the menu because the goal is not to get them to go down a specific sales funnel. The goal is not to get them to log in or something like that. It's to get them to just kind of hunt around your site, find your affiliate offers, that sort of stuff. But if you're a course creator, if you have a software as a service, so a SaaS product, you will probably need a button because effectively a button in the menu is used for two different things. One, as a login portal for returning customers. So for people who have already paid and are trying to take advantage of the product or service, this is again, SaaS or courses, or as a call to purchase that big product or service. So assuming that you do have a button, it should be placed all the way to the right. Now again, consider the margin here. You have a margin on the left for the logo and the logo needs to be inside that margin. Same thing here for the button. You want to have the button inside the margin on the right side. So you want to make sure that that space is nice and straight and clean all the way down the document. It needs to be big enough that it stands out against the rest of the text, but not so big that it overtakes everything, just like with the logo. So in this case, I would say no more than 5% of the width of the menu should be taken up by this button. As to the color, you want it to be different enough from the menu background that it stands out, but you can use hues here. It's okay if you want to use a color that's very similar to it. You just have to be careful with how you're differentiating the button and its background. So obviously if you're using white and then you have a dark blue button, not a problem. But if you're using orange and then you have a dark orange button, it might not stand out enough. So I would suggest maybe adding a border to the button and a drop shadow as well, just to help that stand out a little bit more. But I also want to caution you that if this button looks different from the rest of the page, it's going to look off. So if you don't use drop shadow and you're using flat design on the rest of the page, and then you only use drop shadow and a border for the menu button, it's going to look weird. So you would probably need to change the coloration, change something about the way that that menu looks, maybe invert the colors to make it look right on the menu. All right, let's go over a few other options of things that you can have in the menu that aren't always worth diving into a whole lot. You don't see them every time. Some of them require their own video though, so we can get into those later. So let's first talk about pull downs. So a pull down is a menu of extra options that you get when you mouse over the main option. It's important that when you do this, that you ensure that there are two things that are true with it. First, that it's easy to read the submenu options because those are most likely going to extend below the menu's normal area. So normally your menu might take up like 2% of the total web page, or half of a percent, and this might go over that, so 3% or 4% or something like that. It just depends on how big the submenu is and how far down your menu in general goes. And then the second thing that you need to consider when you're using these is that the main button that you mouse over to get those submenu options is also clickable and sends them somewhere generic. So for instance, maybe they'll click that top main menu button and it'll send them to a page that shows the same 3 submenu options just laid out on the page instead. That might just be a simple solution because if they don't have something to click on there, it can be a little bit frustrating. You might get some rage clicks off of that. Next, let's talk about the search bar. So if you have a lot of content or a lot of products, a search bar makes sense in place of a button up in that top right corner, especially because it's always there if people want to search again. So it just keeps people a little bit more engaged in the process. And then another point that you might want to put up on your search bar is a cart. Now, a cart is an entire video to itself, but let's just point out for now that the cart icon in the menu is constantly going to show people how much has been added to that cart, which is going to entice them to either keep shopping or, because it's standing out, make them want to go over there and finally make that purchase. And this really works well if you have a lot of products or even more than one, or you have accessories or whatever. Now in this entire video, you'll notice that we have not one time addressed mobile, but it's very important to address mobile, so let's do that now. Most of the same rules apply to mobile versions as apply to desktop. It's just a little bit different with how it's presented because there isn't nearly as much screen space. You don't have as much width to play with. So if you're trying to take all of those menu items and jam it into the top in the same way, you got such a small space. Either the text is going to be too small to read, or people are going to be trying to click on certain things and they're going to fat finger it. Not because their finger's fat, but because you just can't tap things with that kind of precision when they're super, super small on the screen. So what should we do here? Well, a mobile menu is 3 parts. There's a background rectangle that spans the width of the screen, the same block that you get on desktop. Logo on the left side, same logo as on desktop. It's just that you don't have to have as big of a margin. You can squeeze this pretty close to the side. Just give it a little bit of space. And a hamburger menu on the right. So what's a hamburger menu? It's those 3 lines that you see on most mobile sites on the top right, and that's a menu. So it looks kind of like a minimalist hamburger, okay? And that's why they call it the hamburger menu. And if you click on that hamburger, you should get the entire menu appearing on the side. It's the exact same menu. You can click on items that have submenus and they'll expand out for submenus. And it's just a lot simpler to navigate the menu on mobile using this side loading or pop down sort of effect with the hamburger menu. So I hope that helps you make those menus work for you and not just be another thing that you feel like you need on your site. Let me know if you've experimented with your menus and its appearance and if that's worked for you, or if you've even eliminated it completely. I would love to know, especially if you've eliminated it on your entire site, how you're doing that. That'd be really interesting to understand. Otherwise, make sure that you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you're into it, and I will catch you in the next one.